USDA study released last year shows U.S. growers used a fungicide on 11% of soybean acres in 2015. They used an insecticide on 22% of bean acres. While those farmers may have been attempting to suppress disease or insect pressures with foliar applications, they may have also been hoping to get a yield bump. We've discussed that desire previously, but Nebraska Extension's Loren Giesler says data compiled from several states indicates the practice doesn't always pay off. We talked with Loren recently and asked about the collaborative work that adds to this discussion.
Over the last year, Jeff, a few universities from other states, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Nebraska, we combined some of our data sets, looked really at fungicide and then fungicide-insecticide applications and how those returned in profitability for growers.
Give me the background of when people started thinking this might be something they could do just to boost yield.
Well, I think it probably goes back to, somewhere in that, 2010, somewhere, in that arena when people really started to do it. And through those years where soybeans were really profitable and we had high market prices, I think it was a good idea. But as we look now under, lower prices and everything else with that, the data that we were looking at was anywhere from 2012 to 2015, I believe was the most recent.
Give me more details on specifically when you're applying, what you're applying.
So most of our farmers are looking at applications if they're making a fungicide application in that R3 to early R4 window. The other thing that a lot of people will do is add an insecticide. And they say, that will return most. And in our specific studies at Nebraska, that's what we've seen, is that if we had a high return, it was typically with a fungicide and an insecticide combined. In most of the cases, not with significant disease and or insect pressure even present. What was observed in this group of studies, which we had 2 years in the Nebraska data set and then some others with these other states, was that actually return on increase in yield, the fungicide insecticide was the highest. However, when we looked at return on investment, it was returning less than 50% consistently across all those. So when you combine a larger data set, much lower chance of return on investment with some of those insecticide and fungicide applications. The other thing I think to think about when we're doing these fungicide and insecticide applications and just general straight fungicides, because the fungicides looked okay too, but again, profitability issue. But is your potential for resistance development? So, long term, every farmer's got to decide what he's doing and if it's paying or not.
You mentioned return on investment. Just to be clear, are you saying they did or did not pay?
They did not pay. They returned less than 50% of the time they were a good investment. So they wouldn't return over 50% of the time.
When you're using the fungicide insecticide and you're boosting yields, do you know why it's happening?
Well, there's a couple things. So one, we know that if we have disease present, and in Nebraska we have frog eye leaf spot and we have brown spot, and those are cases where growers may need to manage those or they have an increased chance of return. So one thing with these studies, they weren't under high disease pressure in general. So that needs to be clarified for sure. Because if a grower has brown spot, if a grower has frog eye leaf spot, and it's significant, you can get additional returns. So that's when we get a piece of that. The other part is that we know that fungicides that are in that QOI or strobilurin fungicide group, they can have plant health responses, right? So we know that there is a physiological response that can occur. And in most cases, that's what's been attributed to that yield gain that we would see with application.
Where do you go from here with the research? Do you continue to try and test at R3? Do you try things with different varieties?
Well, I can tell you that in our program, we'll continue to look at fungicides and applications in that R3 early R4 window. I think that's the timing and that's what's been agreed upon in the industry pretty well from everything that's done. I think just under these times where prices are lower, the more we look at it, it may not be profitable for quite a few of our farmers. Now that said, Jeff, there are producers that have more consistent responses that they're seeing with this, and I would encourage them to continue. But it definitely something that in general across the board, without the specific case involved, we'd see a low potential for return.